Last week, we explored many different angles on the concept of gratitude. But what I realized was there was one main idea that I really wanted to get across. Gratitude is the key to accessing abundance and escaping scarcity. As I thought about it, I realized there is a simple framework that literally every other teacher is missing. And all these other teachers are trying to talk about gratitude and abundance, but they miss this key ingredient. So I created a new framework to explain it to you. I call it the gratitude abundance loop. This loop contains that missing ingredient that everyone else missed. The loop is obvious in one aspect, but also contains a hidden, subtle, energetic layer that runs backwards. This will all become apparent as you listen. And the entire loop is verified by Stanford scientific research and ancient wisdom. By applying it, you can instantly move from the cycle of failure and scarcity to the cycle of joyful abundance. Whether you're struggling financially, feeling stuck in your purpose, or just exhausted by constant striving, this loop shows the way out. So, let me show it to you. This is the abundance gratitude service loop. And service is the missing ingredient. This is the way of service. But it's funny because I found different examples of this loop or ideas of this loop online. And it always contained some like vague thing replacing service. It was like wise choices or awareness. And of course, awareness and wise choices lead to service. But to me, this is the key ingredient. And you'll understand this because, and I'll get into how gratitude leads to service, but service leads to abundance because that's how we serve the world. Everybody who's doing their job is doing service. Everyone who is helping each other out in the world, getting things done, we're all serving one another, whether we're getting paid or not. And that is the whole idea behind the way of service. If you serve the world in your unique way, you can actually get rich doing the best thing for the world, giving the greatest gift that you can give to the world. But all these other teachers have missed this step. But gratitude is the amazing key to this process. One reason that I realize this is because we make the decision to feel gratitude. And gratitude is like this positive view on your life, this positive perspective. And when you choose to make that positive perspective choice on your life, then you will move naturally into service, which leads to abundance, which then leads back to gratitude, if you're smart, right? This is a choice that we have to keep making, this choice to express and feel gratitude. So gratitude is like the entry point, and it's the choice. And you can see, I'll show you, there was a loop that I wanted to almost duplicate. Found this one online, okay? This shows the choice that we have when we decide to have gratitude or do the opposite, which is to be prideful. And I'll explain this later, but the opposite of gratitude is taking things for granted. Right? And it's amazing how the word granted and gratitude have a similar sound to them. Their etymology is similar. And I think that's a synchronicity in the language, that taking something for granted is the opposite of gratitude. And you could see, I hope you guys understand how taking something for granted is related to being prideful, which is what you can see in this graph. So if you make the decision to take things for granted and be prideful, be like, well, I should already have that anyways, right? Because I'm so great. I've already gotten that, so I take it for granted now. I don't have to feel gratitude for it. That leads to pride, and pride cometh before the fall, right? I mean, that everybody knows that. So that's the downfall. And that leads to humility, or maybe a humiliation would be the word I would use. Because humility is like a choice. But a humiliation, again, similar words, They mean different things. A humiliation is like being forced to be humble, right? So that's what happens if we don't follow gratitude. But if we do follow gratitude, we enter this thanksgiving, as this graph puts it, and we have awareness, right? Again, he had this vague idea that we would have awareness, but I'm going to make the argument that gratitude leads naturally to service. It's the full expression of gratitude. And then that leads to what he calls here a higher humility. So again, humiliation versus inherent humility, or humility that you choose to do, choose to express. So let me know in the chat if you guys, that makes sense to you guys. Again, I'll be reading all the chats and saying hi to you guys in a minute after I finish my introduction. But any questions you have, definitely put them in the chat now. All right. So I'm just checking my notes here. Okay. So again, this is the key. This is a quote by philosopher G.K. Chesterton. When it comes to life, the critical thing is whether you take things for granted or take them with gratitude. So at every moment of success, you have a choice, pride or gratitude. Now, I mentioned a second layer to this cycle. So the simple cycle, I'll show it to you again, right? We make a decision to have gratitude. That leads us naturally to service, which naturally leads us to abundance. As we serve the world, we get the rewards of that. And then abundance basically automatically leads to gratitude. Even if you don't do it for long, anyone who gets something that they wanted will feel some level of gratitude, even if it's just like a dopamine hit or just like a little bit of satisfaction. You could say that's like gratitude, but then they have to decide if they're going to express that gratitude in their life, to live that gratitude, or if they're going to take the path of pride, which leads, of course, to a downfall. So that's the basic cycle, but I want to show you guys the secondary, like subtle energetic cycle, okay? So you can see inside, it flows backwards. So gratitude naturally attunes us to abundance. And abundance gives us more chances to do service. And then service actually generates gratitude in others. So it generates reciprocal gratitude. So it basically increases the net gratitude in the world, right? So this is like the subtle aspect. We've talked about this before. In the realm of philosophy, spirituality, there are dimensions of action that we don't perceive all the time because our minds are limited to 3 dimensions basically, or 4 dimensions. And so there's more going on. And so this shows that there's another dimension in this loop. And you'll see how there's a lot of other things that obviously flow into this that, if I put them on the diagram, it would be just too much. So for now, we're focusing on gratitude as the keystone here, but also service. And then that leads to abundance, which I think is what everybody wants. We all want abundance, which is, the ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. That's a Bashar definition. Some people would say the ability to have whatever you want, but that's not a good definition for abundance because often what we want is actually not good for us. But that's a whole nother story. All right. So that's my introduction to the diagram. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll be explaining all of this as we do the rest of the video. So before we get into the actual cycle, I just want to revisit really quickly kind of what we talked about last week. Remember, we did a gratitude stream last week, and it was kind of talking about the power of gratitude, and that's what the rest of this video is about. But I just want you to understand how powerful gratitude is, and we'll use a quote from Cicero. Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. Now, in order to demonstrate the truth of this quote, I want to revisit an idea we've had many times, the Hawkins emotional scale. We've talked about this scale many times. Basically, the more time you can spend towards the top of the scale, the better of a life you're going to have, both because that's your internal state and because that affects how your life is lived and what you experience in your life, right? The law of attraction, basically. Gratitude puts us exactly almost near the perfect top, right? Right in there with joy and love. And what Cicero says here, right, he says, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. We can see how in order to get up to the top levels, you have to incorporate the lower levels. So in order to have gratitude, we have to have reason or wisdom. So gratitude contains the virtue of wisdom. Also, remember last week we talked about how gratitude is kind of the end of the spectrum from forgiveness and acceptance and gratitude. And you can see that again here. Neutrality and acceptance lead up to gratitude. Gratitude being the most powerful, the most, highest vibration of all of those different emotions. Also within gratitude is contained humility, generosity, loyalty, kindness. And humility, again, we talked about that earlier. Remember the connection to the negative loop, right? So without humility, we get humiliated at the bottom, right? If we have pride. Found another great quote. You're going to get a lot of great quotes in this video. I hope you guys enjoy it. There are so many good quotes about gratitude because it's such a powerful topic, spiritual tool, and emotion. This is from Buddhist leader Daisaku Ikeda. The ungrateful feel that it is below them to show any kind of appreciation. They are under the delusion that showing gratitude to others diminishes their own worth. This is their major failing. It is a sense of appreciation that elevates, enriches, and expands the human spirit. And it is arrogance that prevents one from seeing this. Again, a perfect quote that describes this exact process. As he says, arrogance is the same word for pride. Pride is when we don't go through the Thanksgiving. And so we really are called to be grateful for everything in our life. And if you examine your life, you'll see that that is the correct path, right? Again, that is reason. Logic says we should be grateful, and that leads to gratitude. And luckily, gratitude is love and joy. I mean, it's just a great state to be in. It leads to so many other good things. So you can say that this video is my love letter to gratitude. I mean, it's just, I don't know if I can say any more good things about gratitude. It's almost more powerful than service, but I think it's hollow without service, and you'll see that to be the case as we move forward here. A fitting quote to put after the quote from the Buddhist leader is a quote from Buddha. Let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die. So let us all be thankful. In other words, there's always something to be thankful for. There is a magic to the power of gratitude, but I can understand that sometimes we can get really sick of hearing, well, you should be grateful. And we might wonder if it's not just us deluding ourselves. I'm a biomedical engineer and a trained scientist, so I bring the science with the magic. So, I don't know if you guys know Andrew Huberman, but he's a professor of neurobiology at the Stanford School of Medicine, and he runs a fantastic podcast with tons of value. And he actually has an entire podcast dedicated to the subject of gratitude. And the reason that he does is because there is some very intriguing studies that have been done about the practice of gratitude. And this practice is only 5 minutes a day, 3 times a week. And it leads to a ton of measurable health benefits. So I'm going to let Andrew give the little introduction to it, and then we'll go from there.
holiday, which of course is all about giving thanks, gratitude, but also because there's now a wealth of data showing that having an effective gratitude practice can impact a huge number of health variables, both mental health and physical health, in positive ways. Things like cardiovascular health, things like relationships, things like mental health, things like physical and cognitive performance. And these are not small effects. These are very large positive effects. However, in research...
So, very intriguing research, and I definitely encourage you guys to check out that episode. It's fantastic, and we're going to talk about some of the practice actually specifically. But what is amazing is that there are so many health benefits to this practice of gratitude, and they make sense biologically and evolutionarily. So basically, when we observe stories of when we observe stories of gratitude, that is what is really powerful. And so when we hear genuine stories of people being feeling gratitude or expressing gratitude, it triggers this biological response that basically tells our bodies that we are safe, that we live in a trusting society. And so it reduces the expression of fear and like nervousness and increases the functions of the higher order thinking. And so this is all fits in perfectly with our spiritual understandings. So the way that our body responds to things, if we are in fear, it moves us into the lower decision-making processes of the brain. Whereas when we are in a state of gratitude or of trusting and joy and love, as we showed earlier, then we are on a higher level of thinking. We're able to access more complicated and beneficial ideas in that safe environment. So that's just a little bit about Huberman's findings, or I guess it's the Stanford research. So let's check in with chat. I'm glad you guys are here. I am so thankful that there's people who want to come and listen about these ideas and listen to me present them. I hope I do a good enough job for you guys. I'm doing my best to make it great every week. So before I check on the chat, just some more a question for you guys that you can think about and answer in the chat. You know, we had a gratitude live stream last week. Maybe you were here, maybe you weren't. But if you were here or you weren't, you know, you did have Thanksgiving. Tell us, what was your experience with the idea of gratitude this week? Did it affect you? You know, I know that I found myself saying the mantra, "Thank you for everything. I have no complaints whatsoever." And it's just such a beautiful, it comes from a Taoist story. I think, or actually maybe it's a Zen Buddhist story that we told last week. So what were your experiences with gratitude this week? I want to know, guys. Tell me in the chat. Let's see who's here. We've got Susan, Matthew, Eleanor. Welcome to the chat, guys. Welcome to the live stream. Love you guys. I'm so grateful. Yeah, we had Thanksgiving with Matthew and Susan and Eleanor. We all had Thanksgiving together. Isn't that perfect? And we're all in the chat. Amazing. You're talking about the turkey. That was a great turkey. Matthew says, gratitude. I tell my kids, the more grateful they are, the more I desire to spoil them. Right? That's perfect. That's a perfect example of the abundance that comes from gratitude. From the mouth of babes, right? Amazing. I'll put on the full screen for this moment of the chat moment. Abundance in your kitchen. That's right. Eleanor says, Matthew, that's awesome. I wonder if that's how our Father reacts to gratitude too. Oh, our Father capitalizes in God. Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and you know, it's perfect how God has made us into his children, and so we can really gather a lot from God's perspective when we look at a parent's perspective with their child. And yeah, exactly. Like the moment that my child expresses gratitude to me, I'm going to be so blown away because, you know, little kids, they take everything for granted because they have not learned this higher order thinking where gratitude is. True gratitude is a very high level understanding of the world. And it's amazing how God has designed it such that, the right thing to do is also the coolest thing to do, the smartest thing to do, the most beneficial thing to do, and that is to be thankful. So I'm glad we're able to extend Thanksgiving through this day today. Maybe tomorrow you won't be thinking about gratitude, but if I keep pushing out gratitude shorts, you will keep thinking about gratitude, okay? All right, what do we got? Right. Susan says he blesses the giving. Exactly. God blesses the giving. Yes. Matthew says, when I am grateful, I am blessed abundantly, and it moves me to want to share. Exactly what we're going to be talking about. Gratitude leads to being blessed and also makes you want to share. Perfect. Tim's here. Welcome, Tim. Ian's here. Welcome, Ian. So yeah, what was your experience with gratitude, guys, if you're just joining us? Put it in the chat. And any other responses you have to the material. Matthew says, sharing thanks during dinner helped the home have more of a deep feeling of love between our neighbors. Well, that is it, right? So grateful to have and spend time together physically, right? I talked about this in a short last week. I really think we need to be intentional about our relationships and make the decision to spend more time together physically. It's a big thing. Ian says, now that I think about it, you look like Andrew Huberman. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I got to just work out for another 3 years straight, and I'll look like Huberman. All right. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button, guys. It helps the channel. It helps the algorithm, So like and subscribe for the algorithm because it allows the channel to get exposure to more people. And if you think that it's good stuff, it also tells me that you like it. So make sure you hit like and subscribe. It's a very simple thing that you can do to help the channel and to encourage me if you are enjoying this material. All right. I want to do a quick review from last week as to build off of where we were just talking about the power of gratitude. That's really what we talked about last week. That's what I wanted to start the presentation with because it's just so powerful. And that's what allows it to create this loop that we're going to discuss. But, as I mentioned last week, gratitude is a fire element and it's centered around the heart. I thought of another idea related to that. Gratitude is like a spark of a fire, right? It can ignite someone else's fire. Like Matthew just said, when your child says thank you, you are sparked, you are ignited into a new desire to give them more abundance. And as Eleanor said, that's what God feels about us. So that's why this quote is so perfect. If the only prayer you said was thank you, that would be enough. Right? So perfect. And also, right out of the Bible, do not be anxious about anything, right? Don't be afraid. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Right? So this attitude of even if we are feeling lacking, we're not in a state of gratitude because we're worried about life, we're in a state of fear. Here, I think it's the Apostle Paul, he says, don't be anxious about anything, but you can present your requests, but do it in a state of gratitude. And that is really what it's about here, is to understand that we should always be in that state of gratitude, even when we're worried about things or things aren't perfect, which is, obviously most of the time, right? So other things that we covered, gratitude counters anxiety, fear, and most other negative emotions. Just like service, gratitude basically erases your negative emotions, instantaneously. Pretty amazing. Gratitude is directly related to forgiveness and acceptance. We covered that a few minutes ago. Gratitude is the ultimate spiritual lesson, even for negative experiences. So even when something bad happens, we have to learn eventually to be thankful for that event because it shaped who we are, and sometimes it taught us really needed lessons, and we talked about that last week. And we also I brought you the practice of the 3 doors, feeling gratitude for your body, something in the present moment, and then for a relationship that you have. And finally, that mantra, thanks for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. So, in that same idea, the power of gratitude, I want to focus on this particular part of the cycle. Gratitude naturally attunes us to abundance. This is kind of the fun, the most fun one, because it's like magical, right? It's like just giving a prayer and thanksgiving brings abundance to us automatically, or at least allows us to see it much more clearly, and then we can bring more of it into our life, right? So, having demonstrated the incredible power of gratitude, let us continue to demonstrate that power by seeing how it immediately attunes us to the vibration of abundance. Now, this is kind of a new age kind of idea, but you'll see that the people who say these quotes have lived this truth. So, we're going to quote Oprah Winfrey again. Be thankful for what you have. You'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never ever have enough. It's obviously true, but there's also something subtle going on there. But it's like logically true. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you'll never have enough, even if you have more than everyone else. You know, we all have that image of like a super rich person, maybe like Oprah, who has so much money, but they still want more. And I don't think that that's necessarily how she feels. I can't know her position or her idea. But, and I think we often we project bad intentions onto rich people, when if we really studied them, we'd see that they're actually doing a lot of service in the world, and that's why they're rich. It's controversial, and sometimes it's not true, but there's a negative energy for a lot of people in the spiritual community, good people, positive people who are trying to do the right thing. We have a negative energy with wealth. We associate wealth with bad things, and I think that that's a mistake. And I think that's something that I want to help fix with the way of service, is to show people that if you do service in the world, especially the service that makes you unique, that the gift that God gave you to bring to the world, if you can share that with the world in a spirit of service, and not thinking about how much money you're going to make, but thinking about how can I serve the most people the best way, the most powerful way, the most exciting way, you're going to get rich anyways. And you need to get rich, because otherwise you're not going to have time to do the thing that you love. If you don't get paid for the thing that you love, you're going to have to do something else most of the time, and then, you know, in your little spare time, you'll get to do the thing that you love, and you won't actually be serving the world after all. Another quote from Eckhart Tolle, the author of The Power of Now. And if you haven't read The Power of Now, I recommend it. It's very fascinating the way he thinks. It's a different way of thinking. He says, acknowledging the good that you already have in your life is the foundation for all abundance. Very clear, very straightforward instructions, right? That's the way. And you can't get there any other way, in my opinion. We're going to go through these because they're very similar from contemporary thinkers. Now, Anthony Robbins, famous motivational speaker, he says, when you are grateful, fear disappears and abundance appears, right? It's such a perfectly succinct way of describing what I just said in more words, right? Gratitude gets rid of our fears and tunes us to abundance, just as I showed you in the diagram. So you might think this is woo-woo, but I think that would be a mistake. All signs point to gratitude being the real deal, okay? It's in the Bible too, and as I showed you just before in Philippians, when it's instructing you how to pray. So these people have demonstrated the results of these teachings in their lives. Now, this becomes even more obvious when we consider the opposite of gratitude, which attunes us to the opposite of gratitude, which is scarcity. So, again, the opposite of gratitude is pride and taking things for granted. I'll give you another quote. This one from Roy T. Bennett. Be grateful for what you already have while you pursue your goals. If you aren't grateful for what you already have, what makes you think you'd be happy with more? This is the basics of natural law, divine law, and the subtle operation of the Tao. We must be humble and express gratitude instead of taking things for granted and being too prideful to be grateful for everything, even for our basic survival, right? Sorry, I just lost my note spot real quick. So, yeah, if you don't feel gratitude for what you already have, but you're asking for more, natural law, divine law, and the subtle operation of the Tao are going to counter you. So we have to be humble enough to express gratitude even for our basic survival. Listen how the I Ching describes this law. This is the I Ching reading from humility. There's a passage in the I Ching that literally is on humility. Okay, and here's the short version. Heaven makes empty what is full, makes full what is humble. The sun at its zenith descends, and at its nadir rises. High mountains are worn down as valleys are filled. Human destinies are subject to the same immutable loss. But people have it in their power to shape their fate, and when someone in a high position is humble, they shine with the light of wisdom. And those who are lowly but humble will not be passed by. The wise can achieve their aims without boasting. So that is the difference between gratitude and or humility and pride, right? So when we are prideful, we are like the mountain that's tall and proud, and then the elements come and destroy the mountain and pour it into the lowly valley, which is filled up. This is the cycle of life, right? The sun falls at its zenith, and it rises at its nadir, right? We're about to be at the winter solstice. This is the cycle of our life. Everything is a cycle. And so if you find yourself at a high level of abundance and pride, you're going to have a downfall. Whereas if you are abundant but gracious, humble, and filled with gratitude, then, as this passage says, wisdom will shine through you. And if you aren't in abundance and you are still humble and filled with gratitude, then you will not be passed over, because people will see that you're a good person and eventually will try to lift you up. And so will God himself and the Tao, as this passage describes. So gratitude also dissolves the negative, right? So again, we're talking about the power of gratitude and its ability to tune us to abundance. And all the negative things that tune us to scarcity, well, a quote by the author Germany Kent, "It's a funny thing about life. Once you begin to take note of the things you are grateful for, you begin to lose sight of the things that you lack." And this reminds me of a perfect quote from the Wahoo Ching. "In order to eliminate the negative influences, simply ignore them." And so when our life is when we're suffering, when something is going wrong, when we're in scarcity, or we're in fear, we're feeling fear, we're experiencing scarcity, we're experiencing, bad days, bad times. When we express gratitude, those things just are removed from our field of vision. And as Lao Tzu says, when we simply ignore those bad things, eventually they go away. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how it works. Because when you focus on the positive things that you can do, that's what moves you up automatically. It does it physically and it does it energetically. That's what we talk about here on the Way of Service. Like I said, I want to give you the science and the magic. I want to give you the physical process that corresponds directly to the energetic, mental processes that many mystics and ancient texts talk about. Finally, gratitude even has a magic ability to allow us to participate in the excellence of others. And this quote demonstrates that perfectly. Appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. This is such a powerful quote from Voltaire. And I quoted this to my wife last night because she was feeling down because she's a great dancer and she was watching the best dancers in the world on the internet. And she was like, oh, they're so good and I'm not as good. And I'm just, what's the point? But when we appreciate, when we're grateful for people who are in fact better than us at a particular thing, we actually bring that possibility into our life and we share in their success. It's this magical process where appreciation makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. All right. I think we got a couple chats, so I'm going to read them. What do you guys think about all this? I want to know what you think. I want to know what you think. And I am very grateful for every message that you guys send. I really am. So, Tim says, my daily prayers are mostly a mention with thanks. A mention? I'm curious what you mean by that. I'm not clear. But basically you're saying, you're saying that because that's what the Philippians quote is. Yeah. You mention what you want alongside thanks. Exactly. But make sure that you're genuinely thankful, right? If we're just going through the motions, that's not impressive to God. We have to really find it. And we all have our practices, but this is another thing I talk about on this channel is finding the practice that really satisfies you and where you feel like you're getting closer to God. I really recommend meditation, especially meditation on God, asking God to speak to you, asking to see God. He will respond. You will see. All right. I see. Okay, I think Eleanor's about to hit me with a tough question. I love it. Matthew says, gratitude requires awareness and effort, not only to feel it, but to express it. Totally. Right. But it is also kind of automatic. It's like the only thing that takes a hit is your ego. It's amazing how gratitude really is like the great challenge, right? If we can feel gratitude, life is so much easier. But it is hard, but it shouldn't be hard because it's just like a mental switch. It's very interesting. It's an interesting subject to study. I've enjoyed studying it for 2 weeks now. Eleanor says, how do you get into gratitude when you're really cranky and have something that sparks fear, indignance, etc.? Yeah, I mean, that's tough. If you can remember these teachings, you can do it. If you can remember a moment of gratitude, we'll get into that. The practices, really quick, I can tell you the Huberman practice is to read a story where someone expressed genuine gratitude, like a real story. And then the other practice is to recall stories where you helped someone and they said thank you to you, right? So it's really interesting. The practice isn't to express your gratitude for things, it's to recall gratitude stories, which is another reason to follow the way of service, because then you're generating gratitude stories into the world, like these little gems that basically improve people's health and leads them to a better life in 1,000 different ways. It's just amazing how, really, like I mentioned earlier, service is the thing that everybody's missing, because people don't want to tell people, well, you're going to have to serve the world. Well, I'm willing to do it. That's what I'm doing on this channel, okay? It's time to serve the world, guys. It's time to stop being selfish. It doesn't help. It's not good. Nobody's having a good time doing it. Nobody's having a good time just being like, how am I going to get enough money for tomorrow? How am I going to get enough money for this month? How am I going to get enough money for the next decade? How am I going to get enough money for my children's lifetime? Like, it's all about me. It's all about getting money for me and this and that. That's what everybody's life is about. No, Let's stop doing that. We got to start doing service. We still need to start orienting on how can we help the world the most, and money is secondary. And I think eventually money is just going to be obsolete anyways. So this is the way forward. This is the way into the future. This is the argument I've been making for a year now. We're almost, I got to check the calendar. We're almost on the 1 year anniversary of my first video on the way of service. So we're going to, maybe that'll be the next week's show. I don't know. I'm going to have to check. It might be the following week. We might be 2 weeks away from the 1 year anniversary. That'll be fun. But yeah, to answer your question, Eleanor, I think I'm going to have to go back to the Hawkins emotional scale. You know, sometimes when you're... you got to put it on the screen. Sometimes when you're way down here, you know, down in fear or shame or grief or something like that, getting all the way up to gratitude seems like a stretch. It seems like a big leap. So the idea is that if you can reach up for courage, that can lead you to some of the other ones. You know, everything's going to call to a different... we all have our karma. We all have our proclivities, our attraction to different teachings, what calls to us, what makes sense for us. You know, courage is put forward as one of the, you know, the lowest hanging fruit that you can reach for. If you're facing something difficult, you can say to yourself, you know what, I can do it. I can face this. I can try to overcome this, right? And that'll start you on this ladder up. And then, you know, once you've kind of neutralized that, and there's physical things you can do. You can take a deep breath. You can take a walk. You know, I've talked about this on the channel. Like, if your life isn't threatened, you're okay. Like, go take a breath. We live in, we don't live in the dark ages anymore. You know, according to my research, we live in the Bronze Age. We live in the energy age. The age of survival is over. People's survival is not at threat. And even people who are very poor usually have access to some way to survive. So understand that, and then take a deep breath and go to some ancient wisdom that calls to you, or go to courage, or go to acceptance or neutrality, right? Eleanor says, it's easy to feel grateful when you're already at ease, but when you're really disappointed or angry, the true gratitude feels so far away. Right, so like I just said, you can do all that. And then also, this is a reason to practice gratitude. It's a reason to stay in the higher emotions, because then it's that much easier to access gratitude and all of the amazing benefits that come from gratitude, right? Matthew says, in a very real way, I have seen miracles happen in my life over the last 4 months. We seem to have been carried in abundance. We have sought to see the lesson to be learned and grateful for the chance. Well, that's awesome, Matthew. I'd love to hear more specific stories from you about that. You should, if you guys have miracles or synchronicities or awesome things happen in your life, I really recommend you write them down. We all have a notepad in our pocket every day now. It's called your phone. You can just type it in. I like to do voice to text or whatever. You can take a voice note, but it's a really good thing to record. And I love those things. I really want to compile stories. That really fascinates me. And maybe we can have, those are the stories I want to hear if I have you guys on in an interview. I've talked about having Matthew on. I feel like you'd be a good guest, Matthew. So write them down so you can share them, because it'll be such great material. Everybody wants to hear these stories. I think that's right in line with the way of service. As I say, when you follow the way of service, the way of gratitude, you'll have these synchronicities happen. You'll experience these miracles. You'll see your prayers being answered. It really is amazing to behold. Eleanor says, Huberman said something about a gratitude practice. What are some examples of that besides praying? Yeah, so I described it, and I'll describe it in more detail a little later. We'll review it, and you can watch that video from Huberman. But it's very simple, very straightforward. It only takes 5 minutes, and I'll show you a little bit of the video a little later so you can see what he's talking about. Eleanor says, gratitude shouldn't be hard. It seems to be hardest around things that are unresolved, painful, and fearful. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, God understands and knows all of our struggles. So you're not supposed to always be focusing on the negative thing and trying to feel gratitude for it. We talked about that last week. This is in the Huberman research. You can't fool yourself. You can't fake yourself into feeling gratitude. If you don't actually feel gratitude for something, you're not going to feel it. It's just going to lead to the opposite result. You're going to feel more of that negative emotion as you attempt to feel gratitude. It's a fool's errand. But God doesn't expect us to do that. He just expects us to find the things that we can be grateful for, right? And the 3 doors practice is perfect for this. We have a healthy body, right? That's the first door. Anything in the room, like I'm so thankful for the people who made the phone, right? This isn't even a camera. It's a phone that I need anyways, a phone, and it serves to videotape me for this live stream. I'm so grateful for the people who created this magnificent piece of technology and make it work. You know, all these things that we take for granted, instead of taking them for granted, feel gratitude. So the idea is not to focus on the thing that's making you feel fearful and try to feel gratitude in that situation. It's to pull yourself away from that situation that's making you feel negative and realize all the positive things you have, right? I think that applies to anything in our life if we can do it in a spirit, a positive spirit, an uplifting spirit, you're excited to do it. That's how you should be doing it. And if you're not excited to do it, unless it really has to be done right now, right? Is it life-threatening, or is it like your taxes are due tomorrow? I know that's happened to me. But like, if you don't have to do it, and it's really causing you this anguish, pull back, take 5, take a deep breath. Think about something else that you're grateful for. Eleanor says, maybe a gratitude journal would be a good practical practice, as in write down not just what you're grateful for, but when others express gratitude to you. Yes, Eleanor, actually, that's exactly what Huberman says to do, is to keep a journal of those stories where other people were grateful to you. And then you recall those stories. That's part of the practice, is to remember that feeling and to reflect on the emotions that it makes you feel and to journal about it. Yeah, isn't that cool? I love that you said that. And there's gratitude journals for sale. As I was doing research for this, I saw a few of them and I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of fun." But I think I don't want to make it harder. I think nowadays carrying around a gratitude journal is not something most people are going to do. But you have a gratitude journal in your pocket right now, or maybe you're watching me on your gratitude journal, right? So don't overthink it. Just put it in your notes, just so it's something you can remember. It doesn't have to be a formalized practice like that, unless you want it to be. All right. All right, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about... further along than that. Here we go. So we talked about how gratitude, right? I just showed you this picture. Gratitude naturally attunes us to abundance. That's the arrow going from gratitude to abundance. That's the energetic, subtle layer of gratitude's action. I wanted to start with that one because that's what we were talking about last week. But now let's talk about how gratitude leads to service. Start with a quote from William Arthur Ward, author. Gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgivings, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings. So in this quote, you can see he's talking about like work, serving the world, routine jobs. That's when you're out there serving the world. Common days are turned into Thanksgivings, right? This is like your everyday life. And then ordinary opportunities are changed into blessings. So when we can recognize what's to be grateful for in the ordinary day, that's when we start to see that our service is something to be grateful for, and gratitude leads to service that way. And more powerfully, John F. Kennedy says, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. And this really is the core of why gratitude leads to service. Because if you truly feel grateful, you are going to need to share that abundance with other people. It is a natural consequence of feeling gratitude, truly understanding how grateful you should be. Will then immediately lead you to wanting to share what you're grateful for with others. Because it was given to you, now you know you have to give it to others. True gratitude is putting your abundance and gifts to work in service of the world. That's the humility of continuing the chain, right? If we're humble and we understand that it's not because I'm so great that I have this abundance, but because I am a part of the chain of abundance that flows through the world. So we're not falling into the take it for granted mindset. So, and again, service is another choice. As I said before, feeling gratitude is a choice, but if you're going to continue to embrace gratitude, you're going to naturally result and end up in service. It comes from the humility, and it comes from the wisdom that comes from being grateful. True gratitude comes from understanding and logic and wisdom, and so does service. So when we express and feel gratitude, we are going to be led to service. So chat, tell me what's something that you are grateful that you can do, right? A skill, a talent, or a way of helping others. Tell me in the chat what you think. So the next thing I want to talk about is how service leads to abundance. So, if you're not convinced that gratitude leads to service, at least I've shown you how gratitude attunes you to abundance, and now I'm going to show you how service leads to abundance. And this is key. Jesus said, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure." Sorry, I have two different translations. Let me read this translation that's on your screen. You can see that it's just a little bit out of the frame. There we go. "Give, and it will be given to you. They will pour into your lap a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. For by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return." Lao Tzu said essentially the same thing. If your willingness to give blessings is limited, so also is your ability to receive them. This is the subtle operation of the Tao. Right? So both Tao and God are saying the same thing. What you give, by your standard of measure, will it be measured to you in return. This is an eternal spiritual truth taught by pretty much every ascended master like Lao Tzu and Jesus. I think Krishna taught it also. Karma dictates, or divine law dictates, that if you are not willing to give in service, you will not be getting. Are you part of the cycle, or are you trying to stop the cycle with your pride and your ego because you are so great, right? There's another Lao Tzu quote. "If the master can keep giving because there is no end to her wealth. She acts without expectation and succeeds without taking credit." Right? Again, describing the master as this humble person who has no end to her wealth, as in they have no beginning or end of their wealth. Right? They don't think of this is mine and this is theirs and I'm going to increase what's mine and take away from what's theirs. They understand that wealth flows through them like water, right? And that their effect on the world will be greater when they can embrace all things and see them as something that they should be grateful for and that makes them feel abundant so that they can help others eternally. So I do want to explain, guys, do I have a second? Oh yeah, I have another Lao Tzu quote before we get to the next part. "The master has no possessions. The more he does for others, the happier he is. The more he gives to others, the wealthier he is." This is almost the same quote as the previous, but the idea that we have no possessions, but he said the opposite here. There is no end to the master's wealth, right? So it's like a paradox. He has no possessions, but there's no end to her wealth. And as a consequence, basically everything that matters is what he gives to others. But I want you guys to understand, you're not supposed to just serve arbitrarily. This is part of the way of service, and I've talked about this in other videos, but in order to truly serve the world, you need to find your ikigai. It's a Japanese word for your life's purpose. Here is ikigai. It is a combination of, or finding the thing that is what you are good at, and is something that you love, and is something that the world needs, and it's something that you can get paid for. So if you can combine all of those things, you will find your ikigai. The idea is that if you can find something that you love and that you're good at, it's going to fulfill you. It's going to fulfill your mission in the world. I believe that everyone has been given a gift by God to share with the world. It doesn't mean it's one thing over the course of your life. I talk about these in other videos, but it's not just one thing, but it's like your path. And, focusing on what the world needs and what you can be paid for, in addition to what you love and what you're good at, is how you can see how to fit what you're good at and what you love into the world, and figuring out what the world really needs you to do for it. How can you benefit the most people with the talents that you have, right? That's why I'm doing this, because I really feel like this is the most benefit. This concept of the way of service. I was so excited that I was able to get that name, because I felt like it explains perfectly the unique value proposition that I'm trying to bring. That if we can just change our perspective to the way of service, everything changes. And gratitude is a great tool to get there. So that's ikigai. And I wanted to show you ikigai because I want to explain to you that you're supposed to be rich through the way of service. And if you follow your ikigai, you can be rich. It's creating a business or growing your skills or whatever it is, sharing it with the world in a way that the world wants what you have so badly that they're going to pay you for it, right? Again, time is basically an instruction that you should be doing something. It's the market value. If what you're doing has value in the world and you're getting paid for it, now you get to do it more. You get to multiply what you're doing by teaching others to do what you're doing. You grow a business and you train people to help you do what you're doing. This is entrepreneurial life, and that's how you get rich. So that's ikigai, and it fits in perfectly with the way of service. So here's a question for the chat. What was the last time you gave something and it made you feel more abundant, not less? While you guys think about that, let me see if there's any chats in the chat. Matthew says, yes, Eleanor, keeping track of the tender mercies we see daily will simply make them more visible. A journal is a great thing to read when you are blue. Oh, there's a great point. Having a gratitude journal you'll be grateful for that, right? And so you're going to remember what to be grateful for. So like you said earlier, Eleanor, if you're in a negative state, just pick up your gratitude journal. Definitely going to make you feel better. All right. We get to the next section. Wow, we've been going for an hour already? My goodness. Okay. So service generates reciprocal gratitude. That's what we're going to look at next. You can see the subtle cycle at work. When you serve, something happens in the people that you help. They feel gratitude. And here's where the Stanford research gets really interesting. So this is what I explained a little earlier, but let's explain it again. The most powerful gratitude effects don't come from listing what you're grateful for. They come from stories. Either your own stories of receiving help or hearing about other people receiving help. The narrative structure, the story, activates gratitude circuits in ways that simple counting our blessings can't do. This means that when you practice service in the world, it does two things. It helps the people that you're serving directly, and it creates a gratitude story. And when you share that story, everyone who hears it gets their gratitude activated, which can be biologically measured. Your service ripples out exponentially. So, and also, when people express gratitude to you for serving them, you feel grateful, and their gratitude generates your gratitude, and the hidden cycle accelerates. This is why sharing service stories isn't bragging, it's spiritual multiplication. So I want to show you guys that quote, or that the video from Huberman really quick, just a little bit. He explains. Let me fix the audio.
What's really cool about this study also is that the interventions are only 5 minutes long. It's incredible. 5 minutes long. And so as we start to build out our ideal gratitude practice, we know that it has to have certain features. First of all, it has to be grounded in a story, probably a story that you've heard in its entirety at least once. But then you can have a shorthand version, the so-called bullet points that I talked about before, that allow you to drop into that story or the emotional associations with that story. So you don't have to listen to the whole story each time. And that story should be one in which you are genuinely being thanked for something and it made you feel good. Or it could be a story about someone else genuinely expressing thanks. Okay, based on the description of the gratitude practices that we talked about earlier.
So there you have it. And like I said, I definitely recommend checking out that whole video. It's really good. I will say there's something that I don't totally agree with. You know, Huberman is very focused on the science and only the science. And I think the science is amazing. I'm a scientist. I love science. But current scientific studies, I don't think, can quite grasp the ancient, mystical, religious, spiritual power of gratitude. And so I think that it is beneficial to feel gratitude in our meditations and in our prayers and in our daily life for different things. It's just that his study showed the power of, his study showed the power of gratitude stories specifically. So it's a great video, and it of course demonstrates the power of gratitude in literal, physical, scientific terms. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point also. Let's see. So the next part I want to talk about is how abundance gives us more chances for service, and of course also leads back to gratitude. Let's start with a quote from the Tao Te Ching. I think we read this quote earlier, but it's important here as well. The master can keep giving because there is no end to her wealth. She acts without expectation and succeeds without taking credit. The master can keep giving because there's no end to her wealth, right? And this is a natural and clear consequence of abundance, is that we're going to feel able to serve the world more. And again, this is why we should be rich. We need to have money because we need to have all the other forms of abundance, great relationships with each other, multiple relationships with everyone, great relationships with everyone, lots of friendships, lots of people in our network, people that we've served and that can help us and then can help us serve other people. Because being abundant means that we have the time, resources, means, and help to help, right? Sometimes you need help to give someone the service that they need, right? That's why I encourage you to build a business, because eventually you're going to need other people to help you serve the world in the way that you want to serve it. And they're going to be serving the world also through what you've created, that business. So this is why good people need to be rich. Again, if you don't have abundance through your service, then you're not going to have time to do the service that you really want to do, that your soul yearns to do. So never forget to be thankful for what you already have. And that's a setup for our next quote. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Remember that what you now have was once among the things that you only hoped for. So this quote shows us again how we are already abundant, and so we should be feeling grateful and we should be applying that abundance back into the service of the world. So this final arrow completes the physical cycle, right? This abundance leads to gratitude. So we just talked about abundance leads to more chances for service, and then finally, abundance leads to gratitude. That arrow that completes the physical cycle. So abundance leads to gratitude. At a minimum, you get a dopamine hit from every new success. Everyone feels good about winning, but we can choose to amplify this by choosing gratitude and by remembering to be thankful. This is, again, the decision point that we started with. At every moment of abundance, you can choose either take it for granted, choosing pride and the downfall, or recognize it with gratitude, service leading to more abundance. The loop continues or breaks based on that choice. So I hope that that's straightforward. I feel like it's kind of obvious that abundance makes more chances for service because you have more to give, right? So it's a self-perpetuating loop. You can see that loop there. Abundance, more chances for service leads to abundance. More chances for service leads to abundance. All of these have inherent loops, right? Abundance gives you cause to be feeling gratitude, and then gratitude attunes you to more abundance, which leads you to feel more gratitude, etc. And the longer that you focus on that gratitude, the more you're going to attune yourself to abundance, the more willing that you're going to feel to serve, and that's going to generate reciprocal gratitude in the world, and on the positive cycle goes. So what do you guys think in the chat? Tell me, what's one way that having more time, money, energy would let you serve the world better? Think of it that way. And let me know what you think in the chat. Matthew says, genuinely, I have small miracles every week, mostly because I realize we are always being blessed. Me too, Matthew. I even have a Discord channel about it. Ian says, you guys look like twins. Yeah, I guess that's a good thing. He's pretty popular. I'd love to have a podcast on Huberman's level someday. That's a dream. That's a thing to put in my prayers, along with the gratitude that I have this right now with you guys, this intimate stream where there's 5 of you listening. I love you guys. It's just as much fun, if not more fun, than sometime in the future when I have 500 people listening. Matthew says, just imagine how your spouse would respond if you were always grateful for what they did. Believe me, I am learning that. I am practicing that, Matthew. I'm working on that, for sure. Matthew says, I know the more I treat her like a queen, the more I am treated like a king. That's a beautiful, poetic truth. So I want to give you guys a little vision as a conclusion. We're almost at the end of the presentation, but I wanted to connect gratitude to contentment and simplicity, because I think gratitude really leads us to contentment and also simplicity, which have incredible benefits in our lives. And pretty much all the spiritual teachers teach us to have simple lives. And practicing gratitude allows us to do that, right? There's something beautiful in letting go of all the things that we think we need, and we think we need them because of our pride, but ultimately we don't need all these things, and simplifying our life really makes it beautiful. I almost wish I had some quotes about simplicity to add in here, but I know that Yogananda has a great quote. I think I can paraphrase it. Basically, he says, simplify your life and see how beautiful it can become. There's so much beauty that comes from simplicity, and that we can recognize when we're present and not seeking another thing that we can use to call ourselves abundant. If we just recognize ourselves as abundant already. So we talked about abundance, but let me show you what abundance looks like when you're living in gratitude. Not mansions or yachts, but contentment with what is. Let me share the Taoist vision with you guys. And it's straight from the Tao Te Ching. Passage 80 of the Tao Te Ching. People enjoy their food, take pleasure in being with their families, spend weekends working in their gardens, and delight in the doings of the neighborhood. And even though the next country is so close that people can hear its roosters crowing and its dogs barking, they are content to die of old age without ever having gone to see it. It's a perfect vision of a people so content with the everyday doings of their ordinary lives that they don't need to seek vacations or external experiences, because everything is contained perfectly in their simple lives. Why not simply honor your parents, love your children, help your brothers and sisters, be faithful to your friends, care for your mate with devotion, complete your work cooperatively and joyfully, assume responsibility for problems, practice virtue without first demanding it of others, understand the highest truths, yet retain an ordinary manner. That would be true clarity, true simplicity, true mastery. Love your life. Trust the Tao. Make love with the invisible, subtle origin of the universe, and you will give yourself everything that you need. You won't have to hide away forever in spiritual retreats. You can be a gentle, contemplative hermit right here in the middle of everything, utterly unaffected, thoroughly sustained, and rewarded by your integral practices. I love those passages, guys. I hope you enjoy them. I want to close out the stream with a practice that I'm going to teach you called the Rampage of Appreciation. And jump in the chat and put in the things that you guys appreciate if you've got the energy and the inclination. But basically, the Rampage of Appreciation is just sitting there and thinking of all the things that you could be grateful for and just listing them out loud or on a piece of paper or whatever. I think out loud is really the way to do it, or in your mind. So as I said, I'm thankful to the people who made this camera. I'm thankful for every one of you watching this video, either the replay or the people in the chat now. Those of you in the chat who come almost every week, I love you guys. It's everything to me that I'm actually reaching people and that you guys want to hear what I have to say. It's amazing. It's my dream. I'm living my dream. I'm so thankful for this microphone and this desk and this house and the heat. I'm thankful for the wood and the propane and the people who delivered it. I'm thankful for the light, the people who made the light. I'm thankful for the Buddha who put this quote on my wall. Do not dwell on the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. I'm thankful for the people who built this house. I'm thankful for the people who sold us this house. I'm thankful for the sky and the stars and the full moon and the sun that will rise tomorrow. I'm thankful for my bed. I'm thankful for this water that I've been forgetting to drink. I'm thankful for all these amazing books on my bookshelf, all the authors who wrote these incredible works, going through all the aspects of the physical and spiritual world and integrating them together so that I can synthesize everything that they've thought of and put it into my own ideas and bring those ideas to you guys. It's amazing. I could go on and on for a while. So that's my Rampage of Appreciation. I hope you enjoyed it. I suggest you do your own. Put it in the comments or in the chat. I look forward to reading them. So, as I just said, here are your practices. That was the Rampage of Appreciation. I gave you guys the Huberman protocol. We'll review it really quick. You just pick a story of receiving help, either someone else receiving help and thanking you, or a story of somebody else getting helped and thanking them genuinely. And you will feel the same results, amazingly, just participating in that story. And real quick, I want to share a little tidbit. And Huberman is baffled by this, but people who are listening to the stories of gratitude, their heart rates sync up. So their hearts actually come into coherence listening to the story. And he was like, well, we'll try to explain this through neurobiology. He had no idea what was going on. But to me, it's just clear to me, right? As I said before, gratitude is fire, elemental magic, and it's centered in the heart. And the heart has a coherent field that we've barely studied, and it's all part of our spiritual, energetic body. All these things work together. Just we don't have the science to describe all of this yet. And so that's why Huberman is like, yeah, it's just crazy how people's hearts are getting synced up. But he doesn't really comment on what that might mean spiritually, right? But I will. Last week we did the 3 doors, right? It's similar to the Rampage of Appreciation, but it's giving you specific subjects to use. Focus on being thankful for your body, right? I'm thankful for my voice box, which allows me to do this live stream, right? And then after you feel gratitude for your body, then you feel gratitude for the moment. Again, something in the room, the technology that's allowing me to deliver this message to you. I'm so grateful for it. And then finally, the 3rd door is relationship. I am so grateful to my family outside. And I don't know if you can hear my kids screaming, but I'm so grateful for all the joy that they bring me every single day. So there, I just did the 3 doors practice. In the morning, before you look at your phone, before you get up, name one thing you're grateful for, right? Similar to saying your prayers in the morning, but make your prayer be one of gratitude, as we've been instructed by the Apostle Paul and by Meister Eckhart. And then finally, the Sono mantra, thanks for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. Morning, evening, whenever. So let's just summarize everything that we've talked about. Number 1, pray with gratitude. Number 2, gratitude eliminates negative emotions. Number 3, gratitude is a choice that we can always make. Number 3, the physical cycle, gratitude leads to service, which leads to abundance, which leads back to gratitude. And then the subtle energetic cycle, gratitude tunes us to abundance, service creates gratitude stories, and abundance makes service possible. Here again is the cycle to correspond to those points. And that is everything I have for you guys. I'm going to read the chat and let's see what we have. Matthew says, I am grateful for the food I ate, for the growers of the beans and tomatoes. I'm grateful for my warm fireplace. I'm grateful for my wife. Matthew says, can you imagine if you gave thanks while at a restaurant, blessing them with abundance? If one simple prayer in a restaurant could make a difference for the establishment, can you imagine if we on this podcast started doing that each time we went out? How impactful. Yeah, that's beautiful, Matthew. Yeah, I feel like restaurant workers probably don't get enough love. I know that when I was running my restaurant, if I got more gratitude, I'd probably feel a lot better. But that's just one simple thing, right? There's so many different ways we can serve the world through all these masterful teachings that we're learning. I'm so floored by the power of gratitude, and I'm so excited to share it with you. And now you just demonstrated one simple, unique idea that can be carried out into the world, and you share that idea with other people, and then they do it, and it just multiplies and multiplies and multiplies. And yeah, I mean, gratitude is so magical and beautiful and amazing. I had such a great time devoting the last 2 live streams to it, and studying it and reading all the quotes about it. There's just so many great things to talk about. And I love doing it, and I will continue to do it right here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. live. I'm Danny with Way of Service, I think that's all we've got. I don't have any more chats, and that's all the material I have for the day. I love you guys, and I will see you